the cool people tend to hang out late. They like to drink. And once you start drinking, all the stuff comes out, right? And everybody's like good buddies afterwards.
Hey, it's Walter here, and you're at the Think Profit podcast, where we're going to help you develop a rock-solid trading confidence and avoid the potentially endless cycle of system switching. Right, Hugh?
That's right. We're going to help you develop a wealth mindset, develop a trading strategy that fits your core personality, and help you overcome the obstacles that stop over 90% of traders.
All right, Hugh, sounds good. You ready to go?
Yeah, let's do this.
Hey, Walter, they say that you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most. So what are your tips on like finding more successful people to hang out with?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's kind of like finding a mentor. You know, if you're trying to learn a new skill, I believe that you know going to university doesn't necessarily prepare you as much as maybe like working with somebody would, like someone that kind of like says, okay, I'm going to show you how we do this sort of thing, you know, which is kind of funny for me to say that because I spent so much of my life in school, you know, getting a PhD and everything. But having said that, that's how a PhD works in science is you kind of work with a mentor. So, you know, even more so in places like Australia or England, where that's pretty much all you do. Whereas in the US and Canada, they have like courses, you actually take classes, but in other countries, the PhD is literally just working with a mentor. So I guess that makes sense. But so here's the thing for me, and some people do this and I understand why they do it. They just hang out with people because of like what you just said, like they go, oh, this guy's really successful. So I want to learn from him or work with him or hang around him, you know, and kind of figure it out. I find that you kind of like need to like them too. You know what I mean? Like it has to be someone, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it has to be someone. I mean, some people do that. Like they're totally cutthroat and they're just like, you know, in fact, Lincoln's wife, I think his second wife was like that. I think it's the guy who wrote the How to Influence People, How to Make Friends and Influence People. Dale Carnegie, is that his name? Yeah. I think he wrote a biography of Lincoln, which is really good if anyone, if you haven't had a chance to read it. Anyway, it sounded like, and Lincoln had a terrible life. Like he had so many bad things happen. People kind of might know that before he became president. Like becoming president was probably the only thing that he actually succeeded at. And even at the time, he was like Donald Trump is today. Everyone hated him. So it's funny that we look back and we go, this guy is so like, I guess we used to think he was a good president before we tore down his statues and stuff. But anyway, so his second wife was like that. She was cutthroat. You know, she was like, It was funny. Like I think she was at some point considering who to marry, either Lincoln or the guy that Lincoln was running against for Senate. Like she literally like it was kind of like a coin flip. She's like, and then she chose Lincoln. And then he like lost the race, and the other guy won the Senate race or whatever. It was so funny. It was something like that. Anyway, so for me, I like to have friends that you know that I like, and it's nice if they're also someone that you can learn things from. I think part of the process of this, like if you have a lot of friends that you feel like you know they're not doing as well as you, or they're not at the point, like they just seem to always have bad luck, or they always seem to be down. Part of the process is just pruning those relationships from your life. You know what I mean? Like kind of cutting the ones that you don't want that influence in your life anymore, which is always difficult, especially if you've like grown up with somebody since you were kids and that sort of thing.
Or it's a family member.
Tough. Yeah, or a family member. Exactly. Yeah. Even better. Yeah. Good. So I think that's the first thing you do. And then the other thing is it's pretty easy. Like you think about where will people be that you think you'd get along with. So it would be like, if you keep going to McDonald's, what are the chances that you're going to bump into someone that's got a $3 million trading account? You know what I mean? Maybe, but chances are you're probably more likely to find someone who's, you know, not at that level. So there are a lot of places you can go. I mean, that's why they have like clubs and stuff, you know, like they have in Sydney here, they have the American Club where all the Americans hang out, you know, and all this stuff. It's so funny. Like, and they had that, a friend of mine, she worked at the one in Japan, in Tokyo, they have the American Club and they make like deep dish Chicago pizza and, you know, like, so, you know, golfing and things like that. It depends on what you're into. I've made some really good relationships mostly from older people who are retired through surfing. Because in Australia, surfing is and probably similar in the US, like everyone, like there's a whole wide
national sport, right?
Yeah. A lot of people do it. Yeah. It's not just a certain demographic. You know what I mean? Like, whereas you might say, like, if you were going to do badminton, there's probably a certain type of demographic that's going to do that.
Hey there, I hope you're finding this episode useful. I just wanted to let you know that Walter and I give away something valuable every month that helps traders improve their skills. You can enter to win by simply leaving an iTunes review and leaving a comment on our YouTube videos. At the end of each month, we'll look at the comments and reviews from the month and we'll pick a winner at random. Each comment and each review counts for 1 entry during the month that it's submitted. So if you're interested in that, be sure to enter after this podcast is over. All right, back to the episode.
And maybe bowling is similar, but with surfing, it kind of cuts a wide range. And so I've made some really good personal mentoring relationships from people. Some of them have died because they were older from surfing. So for me, that's been. So I would just say, do what you like and think about where the successful people would be and try and go there. If that's something that you would do naturally. Like if it's not, if you're not into like bridge, you don't have to go learn how to play bridge or whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like you don't, and go into the bridge club or whatever, or golf or whatever it is. I would just do what you like to do and think about where they would be. So, but the first step, the most important step, is cutting the relationships from those people that you feel like are holding you back because they're always, everything seems to be against them. They're always kind of a negative, energy on you when you're around, and they kind of drag you down. That's what I would say. What about you? What are your ideas?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I totally believe in what you're saying about taking your interest first and go do that, and then go find some cool people, because there's always going to be cool people in those activities.
Yeah.
And I think the general area is another thing to consider. Like, what area are you doing these activities in? Is it more of an upscale area, or is it like a lower income area or whatever? That can play a factor in it. Another thing that's been helpful is just going to like meetups or any kind of group associated with trading, and then just staying there and hanging out late. Like, I think that's one of the key things. Like, the cool people tend to hang out late. They like to drink. And once you start drinking, all the stuff comes out, right? And everybody's like good buddies afterwards.
That's a good tip. Yeah, that's a really good tip, because it's so true what you just said. That's kind of where, like, those conferences and those things where you have a lot of, whatever the field is, like trading or whatever, and that's where a lot of that stuff happens. You're right. The other thing that you said that reminded me is you can move. Right? So if you live in an area, like let's say you're fairly young and you're renting or whatever, right? And you live in a really nice place, but it's in kind of a cheaper neighborhood. What if you were to move to a really small place, an expensive neighborhood? I think you really bring up a good point, Hugh, what you're saying about when you're saying about where you live, because if you don't live in a nice area, you can always move, to some place that's, especially if you're young and you're kind of mobile, you don't have a family and stuff, and it's easy. You could go from a place where it's kind of nice and bigger, lower neighborhood, go to a really nice neighborhood and get a smaller place, right? And like in Manhattan right now, I hear it's on sale. Like places in Manhattan that were $4,500 a month are now like $2,000. Like it's a 60% discount. Everyone's moving out. No one wants to be there. It's a lot of fear, right? And you've heard, buy when it's fear, people are fearful, and sell when they're greedy. So yeah, so that's the kind of thing that you might think about doing, is being kind of strategic about that, because let's face it, like there's two things we know. I know this from psychology research. It's mostly about kids. Your friends tend to look like you. Right, your friends tend to look like it, and they also tend to live close to you, think like you, that sort of thing. So if you were being very strategic about this, you could move to an area where it's like a rising tide lifts all boats. If more people are more successful there, or whatever, have more disposable income, or whatever you're trying to get in with, that would be one way to do it for sure. Yeah,
totally. I think there's also the point to be made about maybe you don't have to necessarily make friends with people who are already successful, but if they're positive people, they have that mindset, they share similar interests, and I think that's equally useful. The person doesn't have to be successful. You don't have to be that guy chasing all the successful people, right? It's just whoever's cool and has a good mindset.
Yeah, and you can see what not to do too. Like you can like, that's like, I remember there's a comedian, Adam Carolla, and the comedian, he was talking about how he looked around, because he grew up in a tough family sort of thing. And he said, I looked around, I looked at all the families and all the people that are doing really well. And he said, all the Jewish families seem to be doing really well. And what do they have in common? They have a really strong family unit. You know what I mean? Like they were really tight with the family. And he said, that's what I wanted to recreate. So he's tried to recreate that with his kids and stuff like that. So and the other thing I learned from a mentor is, he said, you know what? He said, you know how I learned all this stuff and I got all this and blah, blah, blah. He's got a house in Beverly Hills, really cool guy. I learned a lot from him. He said, I took the shortcut. I said, what do you mean you took the shortcut? He said, I bought my way in. He said, I just paid other people to mentor me. I'm like, really? He goes, is it that easy? He goes, yeah. And like, okay, all right. Like, instead of looking at information and courses and things like that as an expense, I started looking at it like an investment, when he told me that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. The way that he said, I didn't really think of, he's like, yeah, I took the shortcut. I just, bought my way in. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. I'm like, okay. So, that really shifted my thinking when he told me that. So yeah.
Oh yeah, that's huge. I mean, I don't think a lot of people, especially if you don't have a lot of money, they're always thinking about, oh, how can I save on this? How can I download this for free? How can I get the PDF version of this book? It's good to save money and all, but I think that, yeah, you really need to pay up for the education. And you can find these people online. You just do a lot of searching, and again, find the people who are cool, the people you jive with, and then take it from there, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's definitely it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Walter.
See ya.
See ya.
All information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not trading or investment advice.